Welcome to episode 3 of Pest Chats, a podcast series in which PCT interviews members of Syngenta's technical services team, and they share their insights about a variety of pest control topics. I'm Brad Harbison, and my guest today is Nicky Gallagher, the Technical Services Manager for Syngenta. Our topic for today's podcast is ticks. And as PCT's readers will attest, a lot of attention being paid to ticks right now, obviously because of the public health threat of ticks and also because of the emergence of some invasive ticks. So in the following podcast, Nicky and I will discuss tick control, and Nicky will offer P&P some tips for their tick control program. Nicky, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Brad. Very happy to be here.
Great. We're looking forward to talking to you on this topic, Nicky. And Nicky, as I mentioned, ticks have really been in the news a lot lately. And what has prompted the resurgence of tick problems in North America in recent years?
Brad, you're right. There certainly has been an increase in tick-borne diseases. There's been an increase in the range and the number of tick-borne disease in the United States. And in fact, the CDC is reporting that the number of Lyme disease cases in the U.S. has tripled since the 1990s. So we're looking at a growing threat that includes newly discovered diseases. I think the CDC is now reporting about 7 new tick-borne diseases. There's an increasing number of reported tick-borne diseases. The geographic range of tick species is expanding. And then, of course, like you mentioned just a minute ago, we have a new tick species that's been found in the United States, and that's the Asian longhorn tick, Haemophilus longicornis. But I'd say, the exact reasons for the increase in the geographic spread of the ticks and the diseases that they carry is unclear. So there could be a number of factors contributing to this increase. So if we look at the spread of Lyme disease as an example. So the spread of Lyme disease over the past several decades has been linked to changes in land use patterns. So that includes reforestation. So we have reforestation, which is a great thing. But then we have suburban development into those areas. So people are moving into these forested areas. So now we have an increase in spread of tick-borne disease because we have people, the ticks, the deer, and the tick hosts, such as mice, all in very close contact together. So then on top of that, we have an increase in the deer population and the mice population. Now, that can vary from year to year, but generally there is an increase in the deer population for sure. If we look at some of the records of Connecticut, so Lyme disease was originally discovered in Lyme, Connecticut. That's where it gets its name from, that town. In the very early 1900s, the deer population was really low because their habitat was being removed, and deer were part of that was through deer hunting as well. But as the land is protected and deer being protected, the deer numbers shot up, and along with that, the tick population can increase, and the deer tick, which the true common name is the black-legged tick, or the species name is Ixodes scapularis, has a close relationship with deer. Specifically, the adults really rely on deer, and it's very important for the reproductive success of that tick. So all of that ties in together, and of course, we can't leave out the possibility of climate change. That climate change is just one of several important factors that could influence the distribution and occurrence of several vector-borne diseases.
And Nicky, you kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but some of the regions of the country that are really affected. Can you talk a little more about that? What are really sort of the primary tick species that P&Ps need to be aware of, and what areas of the country, what regions of the country are most impacted by tick issues?
Good question, Brad. It's really important to know about the risks in your area. So if you are not a fan of ticks, I hate to tell you that you can try and run and hide, but unfortunately, every state does have ticks. However, the species of ticks and the different diseases are going to vary in different regions. So not all ticks spread the same diseases, even though ticks can be found in every state. So in the United States, we have approximately 80 species of ticks, but what's important is not all of those ticks are a public health threat. So there are about 12 species out of that 80 that are considered a public health concern. But again, not all of those 12 species are going to be found in the same place, and they're going to be in specific areas across the country. But I would say for most of the eastern half of the United States, and I'm kind of saying the eastern half a little bit loosely here, the most common hard ticks that are encountered include the black-legged tick, the American dog tick, and then the Lone Star tick. And again, the diseases that these ticks can carry and spread occur more frequently in certain areas compared to others. So again, that's why it ties back to knowing the importance of risks in your particular area. So again, let's look at Lyme disease as an example. But actually, I'm going to increase the reported cases of disease here beyond Lyme disease. So let's look at Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, and then Powassan virus. So those particular tick-borne diseases are concentrated in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Upper Midwest, and then a couple of small pockets of lower risk in the West Coast. So 95% of the Lyme cases are coming from only about 12 states, and most of those 12 states are in the Northeast, and then a couple in the Upper Midwest, like Minnesota and Wisconsin. Now, the primary tick for Lyme disease in those regions, in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Upper Midwest, is the black-legged tick. A lot of listeners might recognize it more as the deer tick. That tick is expanding its range, and then along with that, the cases of Lyme disease is also expanding its range. So, Brad, we're both based in Ohio, correct? I think you're yeah. So, in Ohio, reports of Lyme disease used to be a uncommon occurrence. So, if you look at the data from the Ohio Department of Health, if you look back into the early 1990s, the reported cases from the Ohio Department of Health were typically 1 to 2 dozen cases from Ohio residents. If you look at the data from last year, 2018, of reported cases of Lyme disease, we had almost 300 cases in 2018 from 50 counties. And for our listeners, we have 88 counties in Ohio. So, for some folks who are based out in the Northeast, 300 cases might not seem like a lot, but for us here in Ohio, that is a very large jump in the number of cases. So if we shift to maybe a different part of the country, there are other very serious tick-borne diseases. So Rocky Mountain spotted fever or ehrlichiosis, more than 60% of those spotted fever cases occur primarily in 5 states. So now we're talking about Arkansas, Missouri, North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. So again, it's important to know, what ticks and what particular diseases you're more at risk for based on your area.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Nikki. Like you said, you and I being from Ohio, it's an issue maybe that wasn't on our radar, but I know a lot of times now you come back in from being outside, you look for not only mosquito bites, but you look for possibility of ticks too. So it's really is a growing concern. Um, Nick, you want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, really kind of from the PMP perspective, what role can PMPs play in providing tick control programs for both residential and commercial accounts?
Exactly, yeah. So just like you said, Brad, it's not just about taking a hike in the forest anymore to worry about an encounter with ticks. There are properties around many homes and businesses that can also provide a suitable habitat for ticks. Especially those yards that are next to wooded areas, brushy areas, or have a lot of like tall grass and leaf litter. The habitat that ticks really prefer. So for a PMP, you have to remember that tick prevention is multi-layered. Tick prevention, just like mosquito control and cockroach control, is going to be an integrated approach. So one part of that is modification to the landscape and personal protection is going to be very important, but the insecticide application is also going to be a key component to a tick program, if not the primary key component. So when that insecticide application is conducted by a pest management professional who truly understands, how to mix the product, how to apply it appropriately, how to read a label, and who also understands tick biology, they're really providing the best recommended practices for tick control. That's going to ensure, the application was done safely and appropriately, all at the same time while reducing the presence of ticks. And I think, as an industry, as you're out there visiting with customers, there's a great opportunity there to provide education and awareness to homeowners and the general public. There's an opportunity to provide educational brochures about, protecting themselves from tick bites, or, just having the ability to point them in the right direction on where to find information about ticks, whether it's through local health departments or the CDC. And even, making your clients aware that you can offer them tick control, because they might not even think about asking that. And actually what I've found is that if you are already offering a mosquito control service to a customer, it's likely that you might already be providing a certain level of tick reduction on that property as well. If there are ticks there that are present, not every property is going to be susceptible to ticks. That's also important to note as well. We've conducted a number of research trials that we have shown that backpack mist blowers, which are used quite frequently for mosquito control, can actually be an excellent tool for tick control as well. We've gone out and conducted these trials with Demand CS, which is our microcapped pyrethroid, and as long as you're going out with the proper equipment, a good backpack mist blower using the appropriate settings, you can force those insecticide droplets into dense vegetation, leaf litter, tall grass, really targeting that tick habitat and getting, a very high level of control.
And Nicky, let's talk a little bit about the biology and behavior. What do PMPs need to understand about tick biology and behavior to successfully control these pests?
Yeah, so anytime we know more about the biology of a pest, the better prepared we are to control them. So I would say with ticks, a couple of things that's handy to know is seasonality of the ticks. Primarily, the majority of tick bites, and also when the increase in tick-borne diseases occur is during the warm months of the year. So typically, from spring through fall is where we see the highest tick activity. Just want to point out, though, that with the black-legged tick, Ixodes scapularis, that tick can actually be active every month of the year So even in December, January, if the temperature is above freezing. So if you're going out on a hike and it's very cold, you could potentially still come across this tick. So the adults are still active in the wintertime. But primarily, our treatments are going to be going out spring through fall, and you want to focus your application to the tick habitat. So there are some slight differences depending on the tick species, but generally, our ticks are going to be found in densely wooded areas, and then that unmaintained transitional edge habitat as you go between a wooded area and into the open area. So you can focus your treatment on that densely wooded area, the lawn perimeter, brushy areas, dense ground vegetation. So these are the areas our tick is going to be hanging out and waiting for a host. So our tick doesn't fly like a mosquito. It doesn't jump like a flea, and that's what those insects use to find their hosts. Our tick hangs out on vegetation, and it's going to wait for a host to walk by. And it could be a mouse, it could be a deer, it could be your dog, it could be you. So we want to try and prevent that interaction of the tick and the host coming together. So we're going to put that insecticide into those heavily vegetated areas where the tick's hanging out. So when the tick does come across that area, it's going to encounter the insecticide like Demansias, and it's going to perish. There can be other areas that you can target to, and these can be non-chemical. So we can also make the habitat less attractive to the tick's preferred hosts. So we're talking about reduction of deer and rodents. It could be putting up a fence, removing habitat that the rodents really like, like stone walls, things like that. And then again, the bigger picture of the whole IPM program, if we can modify the environment so the tick doesn't like it, that's going to even increase our level of control. So ticks like it when it's humid. They like shady areas. So if you can modify the landscape by removing leaf litter, dense vegetation, creating a lot of airflow, putting down mulch, whether that's organic or inorganic, that's going to keep the humidity level down. And in fact, a lot of people will recommend creating sort of a buffer zone. So if that property is on a heavily wooded area, create like a 3-foot buffer zone between the lawn and the wooded area. And that buffer zone is going to be made up of just mulch. So you have this nice sort of dry buffer zone that's going to make it really difficult for a tick to cross. And it also creates a nice visual, so you can tell your kids and other family members, hey, don't cross over that buffer zone, because once you cross over that buffer zone, your chance for encountering a tick is going to be greatly increased.
Those are some great best management practices you mentioned there, Nicky. And I want to talk a little bit about Syngenta. What is Syngenta doing to develop products for this market segment and support the industry's tick control efforts? And can you also talk a little bit about Syngenta's Secure Choice Tick Assurance Program?
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. So Syngenta is committed to providing products with superior performance. But at Syngenta, we also want to share our expertise and knowledge to provide a comprehensive tick control program. So at Syngenta, we have our Secure Choice Tick program, and this is a program that has been field tested, working with the top tick researchers across the country, and together, based on that research, we have developed a treatment protocol that can help reduce your outdoor tick populations following a 90-day treatment cycle. So this is one application of Demansias every 90 days is going to give you tick control and as well as following all of the other integrated approaches that we recommend. So it's a very comprehensive program, and it's also part of a assurance program. So this is a secure choice tick assurance program. So if you follow all of our recommendations and the application doesn't work, that you have to go back and do a retreatment, Syngenta will actually provide the appropriate quantity of Demand CS to to cover that retreatment. So if anybody is interested in learning more about ticks in general, as well as the Secure Choice Tick program, I would recommend that they visit our Syngenta website. So they would go to syngentapmp.com/tick.
And Nicky, I want to talk briefly here about the consumer's role. What can consumers do to assist PMPs in successfully managing ticks around homes and businesses?
Yeah, it's always the results of any program is always going to be much greater when there's collaboration between the homeowner, business owner, and the pest management professional. And I would say the biggest part that a consumer can do, especially on their property, is that landscape modification, where they're going to create the environment that's unattractive to the tick hosts as well as the ticks themselves, so we can decrease that abundance of ticks that could be present in the yard. Typically, we see fewer ticks on well-maintained lawns, except once you get close to that area that's adjacent to the wooded area or stone walls or heavy ground cover and ornamental vegetation. So again, if ideally, they could help adopt a hardscape or a xeriscape landscaping technique, incorporating gravel pathways and mulches and creating that 3-foot or wider buffer zone that I described before. And I think it's also important here for the consumers to be aware that they need to be protecting themselves, their family, and their pets, and that's where personal protection comes in. That if they're going out into tick areas, that they should be wearing appropriate clothes. They can also wear repellents. DEET is still the gold standard for mosquitoes and ticks. Just make sure you are wearing a repellent that is EPA approved. And then you can actually treat your clothes as well. And this is for, our consumers, our homeowners, and our technicians that are out there every day as well. That you can actually buy a product that contains permethrin. I think Terminone is one of the more common brands. You can go to a hiking store, sports store, and purchase these products. And those are labeled for spraying clothes. You don't put it on your skin, but you put it on your clothes. And what's nice about that is it's not just repelling ticks, but if a tick tries to attach to you, it's actually going to die, and it won't have a chance to attach to your skin.
Yeah, that's great information. And again, not just for consumers, but for PMPs out there to be able to protect themselves while doing this work. Well, Nicky, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Brett, I guess I would wrap this up in just saying, the best way to prevent tick-borne disease is to prevent tick bites. And, the best way to do that is, again, wearing those repellents or incorporating permethrin for your clothes. If you've been into an area where there is tick activity, make sure you're checking for ticks as soon as possible. Keep in mind that ticks can attach on any part of the body, and we really mean any part of the body. So make sure you're doing a thorough tick check. And if you do find a tick, remove that tick as soon as possible, and remove that tick as carefully as possible. A good pair of forceps, and grab that tick on the head as close to the attachment point, and just pull firmly and gently. You don't have to go to a doctor and have part of your skin removed, and don't use nail varnish, and don't use candle wax, all of those sort of crazy tales that you hear. If you use those methods, that's just going to increase your risk of disease transmission. You just want to move it appropriately with a good pair of forceps as soon as possible. Because what they found is with ticks, they're actually slow feeders. So once a tick has been attached for 36 hours or more, your chance for disease transmission really starts to shoot up. So if you remove that tick, 36 hours, 24 hours or less, your chance of picking up a disease from that tick is greatly reduced. And you just don't forget to protect your pets as well, because they are susceptible to ticks and the diseases that they can potentially transmit as well. So again, just that whole big picture about preventing ticks from attaching and reducing our chances of tick-borne disease, and when we're out there, just like mosquitoes, again, this is about reducing the presence of ticks. We don't want to make any statements about our protocol that we're reducing or preventing, disease prevention. Because again, we could go into a wooded area, go somewhere completely different, and be bitten by a tick and pick up a disease there.
Yeah, that's great information, and certainly a kind of a great leave-behind message PMPs can give to their customer, and really kind of position themselves as public health experts.
Absolutely.
Well, Nicky, thanks again for joining us and sharing with us some of your perspectives on ticks and some of your tips for PMPs for kind of fine-tuning their tick control programs. And if folks in the industry want to know more about Syngenta's programs, where can they learn more?
Yeah, reach out to your regional sales manager or your regional technical manager, or look us up on our website at syngentapmp.com. If you're interested in learning more about ticks, just add a /tick to that. So syngentapmp.com/ticks.
Great. All right. Well, again, Nicky, thanks again for joining us, and thanks all to our listeners for tuning in today. Have a great day.